It's not as
Awesome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another session of the Luso-American Education Foundation Conference. This is a session entitled Sacred Flames, Shared Tables, Portuguese Festas as Bridges of Belonging. We're very happy to have two panelists here with us. We had one panelist who had told us at the last minute that he could not participate, but we were expecting two others. They may join us later. We'll see what happens. Things happen when you're online like this, but we have, as I said, two great people from two different parts, very different parts of the state, which is important to have geographical presence. So from up north, from the San Pablo area, from San Pablo Hall, we have Elaine Almeida. She's a returning champion to these participants. I think she's participated a couple of times, and here from the valley, a little bit south of Fresno, almost actually a suburb of Fresno, and that is the Selma Portuguese Hall, and that we have our good friend, my prima, as I call her, Tisha Cardoza, who is also a returning champion to a lot of these conferences and a lot of the other events that we have put together through the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute at Fresno State. So welcome to both of you. If the other two show up, they will, of course, be joining us. If not, we will carry on, I think, a very fruitful conversation. So the idea is to explore how Portuguese celebrations, especially the Holy Ghost Festas, but not just them, but especially the Holy Ghost, how these traditions transcend borders, they unite families, neighbors, and cultures across California's diverse landscape. And I think we have the two right people to talk about that because my experiences with both of these halls, they're very multicultural. They are Portuguese, yes, but they have people from different cultures that partake in the festas. I have a little bit more experience with Selma than I do with San Pablo, but I've heard a lot of things and I've talked to a lot of different people. So welcome to Elaine and welcome to Tisha. And I'm going to start actually with the furthest. If Tisha doesn't mind, we'll start with the San Pablo. And the question basically, Elaine, to kick us off and to have a fruitful dialogue is the Portuguese festas. And of course, our celebrations are historically been part of our organizations. That's why the organizations were founded, was because of a Holy Ghost Festa, Our Lady of Fatima Festa, or any other festa in that realm, Our Lady of the Miracles, etc. However, in today's changing world, and how can, in your perspective, Elaine, how can leaders and activists revitalize these traditions so they remain relevant, especially to the younger generations and to what other ethnicities have done? I always use, and Tisha has heard me use this a long time, many times, so she's probably tired of it, which is the Greek festival in Fresno. You know, there's according to the census, I believe about 8 to 9,000 Greek Americans in the Fresno area. Yet they have a celebration for like 40,000 people. So, you know, they've opened up. Obviously, it's not, if it was just the Greek folks, it would be 8,000 people and that's it. Never, and that's for every single one of them to go. So in your perspective, Elaine, how do these festas continue? How do you get in for young people and how do you bring others in from your perspective?
well. Our organization is a very old one. It was organized in 1881, I believe. So it is not new to San Pablo. Uh, and the Portuguese community here, many, many years ago, there were dairies, there were farmers, and it was a center of the Portuguese here in this area. So, besides the history, that when the festas did start, it was always included in to the whole community. Uh, at the old Maple Hall, they would. It was at a time when they would have 2,000 people attending the festa. And I remember going as a child to watch the parade, etc. So I think in terms of keeping it relevant to the younger generation, why am I involved? Because my parents were involved. And I think it's possible that we need to, or what we do in San Pablo is also bring in younger directors who have children, because I think they will, if you grow up in it, you continue to help with it. We also are quite involved with the city, not just in the aspect of our hall is on the city property, but when they have special events, they contact us, we participate. Sometimes I think, in at least in our area, the Portuguese were very much contained amongst themselves. It requires uh, it requires that we get the word out to other people by participating in their events and inviting to ours. We always, to our festa, the mayor is always invited. We have our mass at St. Paul's Church at a regular 12 o'clock mass. Everyone there is invited. So we try to expand by letting people know about the event, and then they talk about it. The best publicity, I think, is when people tell their families and friends, oh, I went to this event.
Indeed. So by being not just the property there, but also by being involved, when you're asked to be involved, when you're asked to participate in some kind of an event where the San Pablo Hall is going to represent the Portuguese culture, it's kind of whetting the appetite for everything else that you do throughout the year, especially the festa.
Certainly, we've worked with the San Pablo Historical Society. They have a location, it's called the Bloom House. And there, anyone that goes to the Bloom House will see numerous representation of the Portuguese at the beginnings of San Pablo. There's a book that is called The Avenue and the Lane, which refers to San Pablo Avenue and Church Lane. And there is a whole section on the Portuguese. So anyone who goes to the San Pablo Historical Society or to what is now the Adobe, they will see pictures of old festas, of the old Maple Hall. But we can't just stay amongst ourselves. We donate to when there's an exhibit of art at the recreation department, we have donated. We've had the Historical Society come to our events to put up displays so that not only the Portuguese people, but anyone coming will also see the interaction between the Portuguese community of San Pablo and the city of San Pablo.
Wonderful. And so, same question to you, Tisha, and welcome, of course. And that is, in today's changing world, how do you see that? How do you see the involvement of the younger generation in a community that's changed immensely in Selma because people have moved to different areas? The dairy industry is not the same that it was even 30 years ago, much less 50 or 60 or 70. And of course and getting the broader communities involved in it. And I know that you have some wonderful stories how that has happened in Selma because I've seen it myself.
Yes. So yeah, Selma's been here since 1907, and it was probably a bigger active Portuguese community back then than we have today. I know there's definitely a Portuguese community, but as far as being active in our hall or our festa, it's very limited. We run off of a board of 10 people, to which 6 are Portuguese, 4 are actually not Portuguese at all. They're either married into the Portuguese lifestyle, so to speak, or they've just become a friend with someone. They came, they saw what we do, and they've decided to join. So I think it's good. I think, as we've talked before, spreading our wings, opening our arms, open to everyone. I think it's very important. Portuguese our festas, they endure because they're living traditions, constantly changing, or they should be changing and adapting to the world around us. We've now been through COVID and had to deal with that, which I think opened, at least down here. For example, we're having our board meeting tonight and we have a Zoom option. No one ever would have thought of having a Zoom option for a board meeting. Back when I was a kid coming to these meetings, it was you get dressed and you go. But I think as leaders of the halls, whether we're president like I am now, it's getting the younger generation involved. And that comes with letting them chair a committee, listening to their ideas. I know when I first came back to the hall, it was, you'd come up with an idea and it's like, we tried that 20 years ago, it didn't work. Well, 20 years ago was 20 years ago. Today, there might be a different spin on it. Let's give it a try. And if it doesn't work, hey, we tried. But you got to try things and you got to have a presence out there. There's, social media, blending, the traditional meetings and activities along with opening ourselves up to, like this conference used to be all done in person. You have a much bigger attendance when you opened it up to being on Zoom and Facebook Live. It's the same for us. We need to get a social media presence, the Facebook, the Instagrams, the TikToks, because that's where a lot of the younger generation gets their news from, their, what activities are going on. So if we have a present there, we might get someone to be a little interested, come to a meeting, get them involved with the festa. But, it's about keeping the traditions of the past, but realizing that as leaders, we must model keeping traditions alive, adapting to new ways of doing it, that don't necessarily take away from the integrity of the festas. And there's so much we can do. And one of the things I do love about our community here, at least in the last few years for sure, is that because we do have a smaller Portuguese community and we serve maybe 1,000 people or something, but most are, our community is mostly Hispanic or whatnot. And this year I was a little short on help. We had some illness. I reached out to my Lions Club. I'm a proud Lion as well, Lions International. I'm president over there as well. And they were ready to help. They came and they manned the Tromoj booth and they were helping with the auction and helping us with the bazaar. And they just came right in and, not a single one other than me is Portuguese in there. So they have a serving attitude, which is great. And they were willing to help out and spend the time down here. And I was super grateful because I was definitely shorthanded. And it helped. So reaching out, being open, and just as was said before, inviting people from the community, going to their events as well, and realizing that we're all one in some degree. We just have our little traditions and we love to share them.
Indeed. And that brings me to the second question. I'll lead it off with you, Tisha, and then go to Elaine, which is kind of the engagement and the participation part. And so I know that you've taken and you just spoke about some of those practical steps that you have, like, for example, hey, I don't have enough people. I need to reach out to my Lions Club since they are a service-oriented club and do a lot of good work. And they were open to it, which sometimes I think in the Portuguese American community, we don't think others are interested. They're just interested in maybe going out and having, a bowl of sopas or some termoço and a Portuguese beer. I'm not here to promote either one of them, so I won't say both or three names, but or wine or whatever. But sometimes people do like to get involved. Do you think that being a smaller community, so I'm not, Selma is a smaller city than, for example, than a $250,000 people city, or in Fresno where there's 500,000 plus, but being a smaller city, a city of around what 30,000 more or less in Selma, and being a smaller Portuguese community, there, according to the census, there are less Portuguese in Selma than there are, for example, in Tulare or even in Hanford or some of these larger areas where there has a stronger community. Do you think that's kind of forced you, in the good sense of the word, if there's such a good sense, being creative and being open and going, for example, like you went on television here a couple of years ago and talking about the festa and bringing people from, Asian Americans and African Americans and Hispanics into it. Do you think that sometimes having a smaller group can make you a little bit more creative? That if you are a community of, let's say six, seven, 8,000 Portuguese, well, my God, if we have 8,000 Portuguese in town, we should be able to get 1,000 to go to the festa. If 7,000 don't go, you can get 1,000. But if you're just a couple of thousand, or even less, does that make you a little bit more creative? And how have you used this creativity to build up on the festa? To build a
Um, uh, to build, yes. No, I absolutely think so. It's that can-do attitude. We have to make it happen. We're going to make it work. And what will happen, what can help us get there? So we do have to often think outside the box because we do have, we've gone through our phases of declining participation uh, in the hall, in wanting to be a director and wanting to show up for work days and stuff like that. So when I was a kid, in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, coming with my grandma to the hall, there was nothing else to do. You came to the hall, you went to the hall meetings, back when there were seven different fraternal or eight different fraternal organizations, always at the hall, 8, 9, 10 times, a month for a meeting or an official visit or something. And it was just something that my grandma took me to, and I had to go. And I maybe didn't appreciate it as much as a young kid as I do now. What I learned and what I can pull up now that I'm actively involved and be like, oh, so and so used to do this. Now it makes sense why they did that, But as a kid, you're like, we're at another meeting talking about the same thing over and over. And it just felt like it didn't always go somewhere. But now kids, my sister with my niece and nephew, there's so much activities for them. There's soccer, there's sports, they don't necessarily need the hall for that social activity anymore. So you got to find other ways to bring them in, and you got to find what works for them. If it's a service attitude, come help us with a service project. One of the things I'm very proud of here at the hall, we open our doors, to have clubs meet here. We have the Knights of Columbus that meet here. We have American Legion. We used to be just the Portuguese clubs that met here every month, but there's not as many Portuguese clubs as there used to be, meaning the fraternal clubs. And so, having those clubs come in and giving them a place to meet and treating them like, essentially family, has them then come to our events and our fundraisers and especially our festa. And, I'm often, this may not sound right in my head but I'm often behind the bar here. I run the bar here at the hall. And as we get close to festa, I'm telling everybody as I'm handing them their drink, hey, have you ever been to our festa? What's that? And I'm explaining what it is and handing them a flyer. And, not everyone comes, but I definitely saw this year a few faces. They're like, hey, I remembered. I put it in my calendar, Trinity Sunday. I came on down. And they're like, I'm going to come next year. You do this every year. You just got to get them here once. And so it's just being creative. Again, social media presence, tying it to service, when we have those other clubs doing their fish fries out of here or their quarterly dinners, having a chat with them and just saying, hey, yes, we're a hall, we're a home for you guys, but we also do this other thing like the festa. This is its background. And, our priest, Father Abel here at St. Joseph's, does a great job of speaking during Mass when we have our festa, and he came from a small town, never heard of a festa, and now he's amazing. He comes down to bless our meat and everybody gets blessed with a bunch of water, and he'll walk through the entire hall, and he's just even the joy that he brings, and then he talks about it. And it's once you touch someone, you just have to touch someone and get them to see it and feel it, partake, whatever, and then they'll spread the word for you as well. So it has forced us, because we're all a smart community, we have had to pull in others of, non-Portuguese, I guess, DNA. But it's worked really well for us, especially in these last few years since COVID, when we had an aging membership here at the hall, and unfortunately have lost several, which I know everybody goes through. So bringing in the young people and, letting them feel that ownership and, take their ideas and running with it, it just expands and grows. It's really just an amazing thing that one conversation can lead to 10 people, 20 people, 100 people, coming and helping you out. It doesn't everything has to be big. In high school, I was in band, and we were a very small marching band. And my first band teacher told us, he would take quality over quantity any day. So I think we just have a great quality group of people, and we're willing to work hard, and we know what we need to get done, and we work together to make it happen. And we pull in everybody that we can, and then they fall in love with us, and it makes it easier the next time.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. That's a wonderful way to do it, and I do see that. And the same thing, Elena, San Pablo, of course, is as you said, has such a rich tradition of the Portuguese that used to be ranchers and farmers, dairymen and things like that, and then of course that became more of a metro area. Things changed, but I don't think you have as many Portuguese Americans in San Pablo as you have, for example, in San Jose or Santa Clara. So you kind of have to be a little bit more creative also. Tell us a little bit about what has been happening there and how that creativity, especially with the young people, because I know that San Pablo has probably one of a great percentage. I don't know what the percentage is, but there's a good percentage, as I've met many of them, who are younger, involved not just in the festa, but involved in the being directors and as Tisha said, it's important to give them some ownership, because I've always felt that some of the students, when I used to teach high school and I would ask them to go help here or there, they say they just want us to go help just to clean up the hall. They just want us to serve the soap. They never have us do anything else or ask us our opinion. And they were kind of right. I mean, these are, of course, 16, 17-year-olds, but they were just needed for that. You have to make them also part of the ownership. Tell us a little bit about the San Pablo situation.
Well, here in San Pablo, as we started to ask, okay, I'm of a, I could be the grandmother of some of our directors easily. And when we brought them in, as Tisha was saying, you listen to them. If they have a new idea, like we did a beer tasting. Everyone does the São Martinho, and it's the wine tasting. We've done in the past a beer tasting. We made francesinhas. That was it. And the room was full of younger people, because when they go to Portugal or when they are in San Jose, those are the things that they like to do. We try to adapt our festa. Our festa is always on the second Sunday of June. This year it happened to be Pentecost Sunday, which makes it a difficult day because of so many festas in the area. But it was also a day that Portugal was playing. There was a game this year. So we had the game. We announced, yes, you will be able to watch the game, so that people would at least come. And the room when Portugal was playing was full. I mean, some had already eaten supper, some had not, but they all stayed. And and there were young and old, because when soccer, a sport like that, is something that touches generations. We also we do what used to be the traditional dinners as fundraising dinners. They were the old style, and we have one set soon, is to do a Bifunish night. In fact, one of our directors was in a competition recently in San Jose. He came in third, which I thought was great. And so we'll do Bifunish night, because it's something that I think everyone likes. People like the traditional meat, potatoes, etc. But we have to go another route. We listen, we try. If it doesn't work out, okay. We do classes. We have 2 set to make Rissóis de Camarão again because people liked it. It's a limited group. People will bring, we've had a lot of young people come and it's hands-on. They get to take all the products with them. We did arroz doce. We're going to do pastéis de bacalhau this year too. So we try to offer something different where people can, a mom can bring their daughter, even husbands and wives together will prepare food. We also this year because it is World Cup and some of the games will be here, we'll set up a day, when Portugal is playing and just open the hall. It can't always be for raising of monies. Of course, in San Pablo, we have a different situation. We are on city property. We don't have an electric bill. We don't have a water bill. We don't have property taxes. So our circumstances are much different than other halls. So we have an opportunity to do more and not worry, geez, is the gas bill, PG&E bill going to be really high? We do things like you bring cornhole and let the kids play. You got to have extra things. At the Festa, we kind of eliminated, we used to do a kermesse. And the kermesse is fine, but it was only the kids playing. We started doing a country store. And we do exceptionally well. Everything must be homegrown or homemade. And people will, you call around, people bring jams, aguardentes, homemade sweets. And before the parade actually leaves the hall, a lot of people are buying things that they're going to munch on during the parade. And afterwards, we had pineapple plants a couple of years ago. Someone was growing here. We try to have something different that people might talk about. And in that, publicity, word of mouth, social media, I agree totally with Tisha. And that's where the younger generation does come in. They're the ones that can do the flyers with the different flair. We're just going to print things one certain way. It's, we also try to cross organizations in a sense. San Pablo has always, we didn't this last year because of the age factor, but with the Luso-American Education Foundation, our queens are always sponsored by us to go to the Luso camp every year. It is something that I think the parents like them to go. They learn, they have fun. And we offer that as a way to get, sometimes girls don't feel they're getting something besides eating sopas at different parades. We try to offer, so we get people interested. And those kids who go to the Luso camp, when they come back, they talk to their friends and tell them about it. And in that talking, they also mentioned San Pablo. Oh yeah, I was a queen for San Pablo. So I think the time of this is how the festa is done, this is the way we raise monies. You don't go door to door, which we do not, I should say. We don't go door to door with sweetbreads like we used to, asking for donations. And that was a common practice. No, some of the younger people have been much more creative. Another aspect is young people do not carry cash like someone like myself. So yeah, we're on square one. We take Venmo. We have to change all that make it easier for people.
Indeed, yeah. Change with the time. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, and not getting political, just getting political in the aspect of the not getting political or partisan, but we have a bit of the divisive spirits. Things have been divisive for a while in our country, and sometimes you see that in Festas. I had a family tell me the other day that in a particular city, it's not either San Pablo or Selma. Let's say it's somewhere in between. They leave town when there's a Portuguese festa because they don't want to go to the festa anymore because it's gotten so political and so divisive and so argumentative that they don't want to do it anymore, and they just want to get along with people, so they leave. Um, the other thing is, festas have changed, as both of you have said, and in your cases, because of the young involvement and sort of not having the large, thousands and thousands of Portuguese Americans. So you have to be a bit more creative with other ethnicities, other folks. And Tisha mentioned, we just have to entice them to come once, and they like it, and they want to come again. I mean, I can tell a story, and it's a true story, unfortunately. And this happened maybe about 30 years ago. One of our local festas here in the valley, this south of it in the valley, and we knew a family, Hispanic family that was going through some very tough times. And we told them about the festa. Go to the festa because they had like 7 kids. Go to the festa, and it's just free food. And they went, and they felt very discriminated. This was again 25 years ago, so 25 to 30 years ago. So it's a long time. Things have changed. I know that things have changed, but they felt, and I said to my, and I felt bad because not only do we entice them to go, but also because that's totally against the spirit of Isabel, of the Queen. So, I mean, it's like, like night and day. So how do you think that festas, by opening up, as you both have mentioned, and kudos to you for the work that you do, how do you think that festas, because of their sacred and their communal dimensions, can serve as bridges of belonging, can promote unity, dialogue, inclusivity among, intergenerational and also along cultural lines? So I'll start with this again. How do you think that festas can do that? And is that happening a bit already uh, because of your need to expand outside of a small Portuguese American community? How is that if that's happening, how is it happening there? And do you think festas can really play, I think, an important role if they can look at their roots? And I know that you're quite well versed in the story of the Queen, so if you can mix that in as well.
Yeah. No, I feel that the festas, it's a tradition. The tradition is what gives us a stability, a foundation, a base to grow upon. But the survival will require adaptation, and as an organization, embracing the community we live in as a whole. Non-Portuguese spouses, friends, neighbors. We have to basically come up with almost like a hybrid model that we keep our sacred traditions, keep our faith, um, but open up to other cultures and, um, serve as a place for everybody to get together. And, your story, um, I kind of remember something similar. I was part of an organization, and a person I knew, he was a past president of this organization, just wanted to see how his fellow members would react. And he hired an actor to come to the festa. It wasn't necessarily a big public festa that happened all the time. It was more around convention time kind of festa. And hired someone that looked homeless or unhoused now. I'm sorry, that's the right word, unhoused. And came in, and St. Isabel, her arms were open to everyone. Her goal was to feed everyone, to help everyone. All of her stories were of helping. All of her miracles, the roses, the bread, was all around helping, feeding her people, keeping her people alive, keeping her people around. All of it was a very generous spirit. And that's what we try to do now with the festas. We're making, was it 10, 13 pots of meat, bread, cabbage. I know everybody makes it a little different, adds different things, but that's our basic one here in Selma. And it's to feed the people. You want to feed the people. And it's a way of giving back. We're very fortunate. I was always taught by my grandma that, when I first started to try to get a little older and understand festas and why we do this thing once a year, etc. As a young teenager, I guess it would be, she always told me, if Saint Isabel wasn't so gracious and so generous, and God hadn't blessed her with these miracles of, being able to turn the roses into bread so she could go feed people, some of those very well could have been our relatives per se. No one necessarily knows, but it could be. And therefore, had she not had those acts of kindness and generosity, we may not be here. So that's what's always kind of resonated in my mind. And asking for help. It's not always easy to ask for help, but being in the small community that we have had some challenges with our festa, and it actually led me not just the one time going onto TV, which was probably one of our biggest festas in the last 3-4 years. I actually had to set up tables from outside on the grass because we had so many people come. Um, but it involved getting in with our city council and our honorable mayor and going to council meetings. And my cousin Constance and I and Erica, we went to a council meeting. It was over traffic control and all these things that it was going to add about like $10,000-11,000 for us just to have our procession. And we're like, what do we do? That's a lot of money just to have a procession. But the procession is such an important part of our celebration. And so we go to this meeting and we just thought, okay, we're going to talk. No one else that's probably part of the community is going to talk on our behalf. We got to fight for ourselves, so to speak. And there was a woman, Mrs. Ramirez, who we didn't know her at the time, but she gets up and she speaks after I spoke. I spoke first, making my plea, like, help us keep our traditions alive. And she got up and um, her grandmother brought her to the festa, and they came every year, and they're Hispanic, Mrs. Ramirez, and she remembers, and now she brings her grandkids to the festa. And she spoke because you're only given 2 minutes or whatever it is to speak at a city council meeting, and she spoke, and she had us all in the back in tears because it's like, we know why it's important to us, but to hear someone from the community how important it is for them, non-Portuguese, but literally now is 4 generations, because her grandma brought her and her mother and herself, and now she brings her son and her grandkids. So really 5 generations. So 5 generations that have so loved our little celebration here that she came to a city council meeting to fight for us on our behalf. And since then, her and her son, we now have to have traffic control people. And you know, uh, city council members have helped us with our traffic control, Asian American, Hispanic, Knights of Columbus have helped us. Everybody has been like, this is what you need. We're going to help you. And they'll man the streets and they sit out there for the procession. That's now a requirement. And, that first year, I probably got half the gray hair just from that first festa, trying to be like, what are we going to do? Like, nothing's working. And we felt the world was against us, but the connections that we have with individuals, even beyond what we knew, came to our rescue, literally. And so I think it's being open. So, your story tugs at my heart because it's a bad story. It's not something we want to hear, but it's a true story. And I can't say it's never happened here. I don't really remember 25 years ago, but unfortunately it may have, as well. But I just like that now it's all inclusive. We do focus on Saint Isabel and what she stood for. And, my background is with SPRSI, which is obviously very much a devotion to Saint Isabel. And so we've always had it, our job is to imitate the beauty of her virtues, the generosity, the charity, the sociability, the protection, protection of traditions. But it really comes with being open-minded to opening your hearts, opening your hall, opening your events to really everybody. And like I said, the last 2 years with some of the struggles we've had, and this year, the city council, it's a whole new city council here in Selma. and they took care of a lot more for us. They had the city doing all the barricades that I had to pay for last year. And I mean, just seeing how the community has really stepped up to help us here once we made our pleas was just heartwarming, and you have to imagine that, as St. Isabel's handing that bread to someone that's hungry, the feeling she got is kind of the feeling we get now in return for the people that help us when we need help. So
Indeed, indeed, that is touching. Yeah, and that's wonderful to see the whole entire city council. Yes, it's a small town, of around 30,000 people, but it doesn't happen in a lot of us other small towns throughout America as well. And I think it's because of the inclusivity that you have been promoting. You and your team has been promoting for, at least the last, 15 to 20 years. So, these things take time, you have to, like any seed, it's just not going to be, a tree tomorrow morning. It may take, 5 or 7 years, but it will come through. And one of the important things before I turn to Elaine for the same kind of question, which is, how does the community serve as a bridge of belonging that promotes unity, dialogue, inclusivity amongst various generations? Portuguese American or not, and cultural lines as well. But I just wanted to remind folks that those who are following us and that, Rainha Santa Isabel did something that a lot of people don't know about, which is she began what is called the Misericórdias in Portugal. And the Misericórdias are now they still are very important institutions in Portugal. They have nursing homes for the elderly. They have had programs for young folks. They have been orphanages. They've been places of security for those who have less than us, though, for those who need, family support, for those who have needed at different parts of their lives. The Misericórdias are a very important institution in Portugal. They're tax-free, and they actually get funding from the government now. But Lucia Silva was telling me something I did not know. They're very big in Brazil. There's like over 65 or 70 Misericórdias in Brazil. They're very big in other Portuguese-speaking countries, in Angola, Mozambique. So and this all began by, Rainha Santa Isabel. She did not only, feed those people, she kind of began this institution to make sure that they was continued beyond her. And it's a wonderful story. But Elaine, so how does San Pablo do this? And I know of the inclusivity because I remember when one of the racial events that happened in our country a few years ago, San Pablo was the only hall that came out with a actual statement, and I just think the statement was important independently of where one is politically. I'm not going there. It is just because it was a very humane statement. It was a statement about the dignity of the human being, whether he or she is, of a different color skin or a different cultural background or a different ethnicity or whatever. And so it was the only hall that had the guts to do that. So kudos to you. So tell us a little bit of how the inclusivity and how the dialogue and how to promote unity and bridges of belonging are kind of part of what you do there.
I think probably because the directors, we're in the Bay Area, which has a variety. It's as diverse in political opinions as it is in personal opinions and tastes. But the one thing that holds true, at least amongst our people, is the respect. You can have your beliefs, you can have your opinions. However, I may disagree. I think yes, we did that a few years ago. It had to do with Black Lives Matter, but it was kind of all the directors agreed because everyone was in that situation. My parents came during the wartime. I have a continental father and a Zurian mother, but I also saw things that they had to suffer. They were discriminated against. So I think the Portuguese people are or should know what it's like to be treated not as fairly as someone else based on the fact that you have an accent. There used to be a term that my parents would use that later on I said, that's not a good term. And that was they spoke broken English. You know, that's not correct. They speak English with an accent. So here it's, again, also younger people involved. We had a plaque put outside, and in all reality, this area belonged to the Olonis. And it was important to the directors to include something on our plaque outside our hall that recognized that the land was originally Native American. I think if people are not including other people, it's because they're secluded. They're not open to they're not living on a day-to-day basis with diversity. We had a family business, and my father used to say, you know, if George Washington is on that $1 bill, it doesn't matter who's giving it to you. You must, So Portuguese organizations should be the same way. If you want people to come and help, if you want them to support, to attend events, it has to. There's no room anymore, in our opinion here, to just be Portuguese. You can be Portuguese adjacent. So and the directors of an organization or the officers of an organization, any organization, it's their responsibility to allow different opinions, different ideas. We don't speak politics in our hall. Not at all. We know there are going to be people of all different beliefs, and that's fine. But no, we might talk about how cold the beer is, and we'll change the subject. If someone starts in with anything, I think every director we have will kind of, hey, we'll change the subject real quickly. Ask a question.
Sure. And my last question, I had asked you for an hour, and we're going to try to keep it within that hour time frame. I know that Tisha just said she had a meeting in a little bit. And so a little bit about future vision and opportunities. And I think that that's important. I think it's wonderful to talk about the past, but it's also good to talk about the present and to have a vision about the future as well, but to mix those in. And during one of our sessions today about Camões, Professor Maria do Céu Fraga from the University of the Azores mentioned this that I think was a wonderful line. I wrote it down and I'll use it and reuse it, which is talking about the works of Luís Vaz de Camões, very dense poetry, very epic poetry, and from, nearly 500 years ago. And he's our epic poem. He's the Portuguese language, which Shakespeare's to English and Cervantes to Spanish, etc. And she said, it's important to bring Camões to today's world, but it's also important for young people and all of us to go back to Camões' world, to Camões' age, and to look at that, because that was the basis for what we have now. I'm talking about language, but you can talk about tradition, you can talk about, many other aspects of culture. So I think it is important for us to talk about the past, because it's part of who we are, and the story, of what Tisha was talking about, Queen Isabel, and when I was talking about the other aspect, a bit of a negative story, but a true story, unfortunately, and some other things that we've talked about, and how it's progressed, how we've gone from that, 30 years ago to, just a couple of years ago, a statement being made on behalf of, racial justice by one of our halls. So there's been a lot of progress, whether we want to admit it or not. So let's look at a little bit present and into the future. If you could propose, like a solution or some kind of a suggestion to strengthen the Portuguese American organizations over, and I would say the next decade. I think that sometimes we want to change something within 2 or 3 years. I remember that too. That was a phase in my life. I was probably 35 or 40 or 45. I had no patience for anything. Now I've learned, that things can take a little bit longer. And I've also, but by same token, there's a little bit of sense of urgency. In my case, I'm almost 67, and one never knows how long you have. So there's also a sense of urgency to complete things. But what do you look at? Something that the Portuguese American organizations, something concrete that you would, that solution that would strengthen our organizations over the next decade. What would it be if you could do something like that, if you could suggest, or if you could change you yourself? And most importantly, after that, is how do we ensure that these, what our title of our panel, Sacred Flames, as in, of course, the Holy Spirit, and shared tables, which is the idea of the Queen, continue to inspire belonging for future generations. Because I feel that if the story gets lost, then the festas get lost. We can innovate, and we should, but the nexus of the story should be there in order, and this idea of belonging, to a place, and being, and having others belong to it as well, and openness is very important with this tradition. So I can start with Elaine this time, so I don't always pick on Tisha first. What's your take on this, the community today, and the future, and how do what can we do besides talking, as we are here? That's important, because others can. I saw Tisha, and I did too. I took a couple of notes when you were saying about some of the things that you were doing, because I think that that's something can be learned. Tisha was doing the same thing for her organization. So talking, dialogue is important because we learn from each other. But Elaine, so your thoughts, please.
I think it's that's a difficult question. I saw the question. That's a difficult one to answer. Each one has to decide what works within their own organization. I think people need to be open to new ideas, try them out, listen to the young people. As you said before, I was one that, sure, young generation was brought in to take the garbage out. That shit, that's past. I am involved in the festa because my parents were involved, grandparents. I had my step grandmother was a queen in San Pablo years ago, and that's what will continue as long as you can still have people bring their young children, talk about it, publicize it every opportunity. Sometimes at the festa, when we're serving sopas, and there are people that we know don't know the tradition, we say, oh, by the way, we have time to talk to them. Our crowds are not in the thousands, believe me. 500 is a good festa. We inform people whenever we can. We talk to the kids. They see even what's being done at our fundraisers. Little kids come. We'll have a game for them to play. But that's what we do. It doesn't mean it's going to work for someone else. I just think organizations need to do as much as they can, be active. It can't be just a festa once a year. You have to be out there on a daily basis so that people who attend, whatever it is, if it's a soccer game, if it is learning, if it's the Knights of Columbus that are coming for a meeting, they should hear about the Portuguese organization. Pound it out there as much as they can. Social media. Our secretary at Eusebio, he sends more emails. They are constantly.
Yes, too many. Eduardo sends too many. You're right.
There'll be the one mailing in the beginning, which is people can put on the refrigerator. And after that, it's like pounded out. It's like, don't let anyone forget that we are here. I'm going to turn on my light. You're going to
And that's important. Yes, indeed. Yeah, that's important as well. Yeah,
And so each one has to find out what works in their area.
correct. Indeed.
I know for a fact, like in what we call the Valley, auctions do incredibly well. People raise incredible amount of money. We don't in San Pablo. It's not where people spend the money. Our country store happens to bring in more money than anything that we do. And it's a way that everyone contributes, small, large, handmade things, handcrafted, sewn, everything that's homemade and handmade. But that's what works for us. Other places, oh yeah, a tablecloth can be bought for $1,000 and donated back in 3 or 4 times. If we get $500 on an auction, we feel good about it. That's not where it would. If we hit everybody with auction things, we'll be there forever and never. Got to find out what is productive for each organization.
Indeed, it's a it's an individual based on the tradition, but an individual situation from
But
community.
the tradition is sincerely important. In all of this, we must emphasize what the tradition is. People they won't learn if we don't teach them.
Indeed. Tisha, your thoughts on that? So what would you like to propose as a solution for some of the things that you're probably going to you need to propose to your organization, right? You want to, you're hard at work
Yeah.
24/7. But and how do we keep this alive and some of the things that we've talked about, opening up everything, but what are your thoughts in the ever-changing community? And it will happen. What happens in Selma, what may have happened in Selma in the last 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years, or even before the pandemic, of a community becoming smaller and going to other areas. Trust me, it's happening all over California because kids go to school. They don't, sometimes they go to university up north or down south. They don't come back, or they go out of state. And so the communities are all going to change their dynamics within, especially the next 10 to 15 years. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the festa reminds us of what can unite everybody, and that is the food. It's obviously not just the food, but the food is what gets people there. Sharing food. We've touched a little bit about politics, and much like Elaine, we don't talk about that at the hall either. We're a very diverse group here. But I remember my grandma, many holidays, whether we're arguing over politics, sports teams, whatever. Once she put the food down on the table, we shut up and ate. And it was over and it switched the thing. So the sharing of food, the honoring of our faith, keeping our heritage alive, um, that's the foundation. And the foundation is what you need to build upon. And then building upon depends on your community. Like I agree with Elaine, what works in one community may not work in another. But it's good. And yes, I was writing down notes because I was like, oh, that's a pretty good idea, and we try it here. It might work and great. If not, hey, we tried. Often when we have new people come to a board meeting, like, I have a dumb question. There is no dumb question. The one you didn't ask is the dumb question. We're here to provide answers. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your ideas. And I know we've talked about it a few times on here, but I kind of think something that I'd like to see, for the future. I know we've talked about, syncing up together and doing some kind of big social media thing, where we all raise our flags on, Dia de Portugal or something like that. But I think a concrete solution to, continuing with the festas and our organizations is to create a statewide, so for us here in California, a statewide Portuguese network that links all of our festas, the folklore, youth groups, service projects that we may do, because we've talked about the Lions a little bit, all across California, because it's all about networking and ideas. And, you know, again, with COVID, I still think one of the best things we had was, I know I didn't have a big social media presence till then, but then that's became my world because I couldn't talk to anybody. I didn't know what people were doing. You couldn't travel. You were kind of stuck. So social media became, I don't know, a crutch, it became a way of life, I guess, is what it is. So I think, we now have the technology to where, you know, us here in Selma can connect with San Pablo, San Diego, Eureka, all in a matter of seconds via, Facebook, Instagram, texting, whatever it is. But I think if we can build a network where everybody shares their resources and, even what you all do at PBBI at Fresno State, you have um, the recordings of the stories,
Oral history,
the
yeah.
yes,
Oral history.
oral history. Thank you. I was losing the words. The oral history that you guys have done, and there's this conference that we're on right now. It's not just right now. You're gonna post it on YouTube, and you're gonna get more shares going forward. And it's having that presence, that digital presence that allows us to tell our past, our stories, and ask for help when we need it. And it's about the communication. We're nothing if we don't have communication. So we need to have the cross community exchanges, that will strengthen our halls and our societies and our dance, our folklores, and it will ensure that the sacred flames are passed on, and the shared tables continue to inspire that sense of belonging for generations to come. We just all have to, you know, I would love to see a giant network where I can just log on to Facebook. I'm an early riser because I start work early. And I would just love that, people from the East Coast, could have already posted some ideas or what they're doing or some videos of their events. Like, I love it. But that we're still individual.
Sure.
SPA has our Facebook page and we do our thing. And I can go to San Pablo's page or I can go to San Diego's page or wherever, but we're on the same platform, but we need to find the way to connect to where it's literally connecting, and find that peace. And I don't think we're far from it, honestly. I think we could be there. Just might take, someone a little savvier than myself to put the stuff in place. But I think the tools are there. We just need to utilize it and, ensure that we just all stay connected. I was part of not too long ago. I don't know how I got a part of it, but I did lose a Facebook account and had to start a new one. But in my old one, there was someone that was trying, and they kind of just invited some random people. And sometimes when there were issues, there was a few times they would ask for advice. Hey, I have this issue at my hall. Have you ran into this? And one time I was like, yeah, unfortunately we have. Here's what we did here. That kind of stuff but on a broader thing. This was a little Facebook, I guess, messenger group, and there's maybe 10 different halls, I think, at the time. But I think you've told us before there's like 70 some festas in California. So let's get all 70. Let's rally up and get her done. We can do it. We're Portuguese. We do everything.
We have a little bit of an issue sometimes being what we call too parochial, and everything is just in our parish, and but I think that's a lesson that I think we're learning. The pandemic taught us that, I think, and I think the younger generation is certainly certainly more open to that than the older generation. One of the things I'd like to, as an end, and now it will be the end, okay? Promise you, I'm not going to keep you any longer. But the prior panel had an interesting idea that I'd like to ask both of you, which was the creation. Some ethnic groups are doing this in Canada and other parts and a couple parts in the US, which is the creation of an online museum. So, in other words, like an online museum of the Festas, where we would, you take pictures of artifacts that you have that are dear and important, and those things are put online, basically, not a social media, but a site, a website that is, for example, the Portuguese Museum of the Holy Ghost Festas in California, where you can have kind of a living museum, because a museum is not just something you want to visit. Yes, we'd have to have those historical things on there, but also that ongoing information that you said, that dialogue, that the yearly festas, where everybody would post, two or three or four pictures, of their festa, and you see all the diversity that there is. Because one of our panelist said, and it was brilliant. It was a wonderful way to end it. She said that she believes that the future is brilliant for the Portuguese Americans and the Portuguese Canadians. We just have to work a little bit more. What are your thoughts, Tisha, on an online museum that's a space that's online? Because we can't, we can't. It's kind of impossible to. At one time, there was a thought about a museum in Kings County for Portuguese Americans, basically the valley. But it was a project that was going to cost $1.5 to $2 million. You can't build a museum, even in the valley where property is a little bit lower than they are in San Pablo. But you can't build a
True.
museum for less than $1.5 to $2 million. And then how do you sustain that? How do you sustain that? What are your thoughts, both of you, on some online presence that would register this on an ongoing basis? Tisha, we'll start with you since you had that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's great. As you said, the brick and mortar, which, even businesses are getting away from, I don't go in a store as often. COVID taught me I can get a lot of stuff online, and that's how it comes. My Prime Amazon comes all the time. So I think the digital world, social website, museum, whatever it is, as you said, to sustain is relatively cheap. I mean, pennies compared to a brick and mortar building, and you can be all inclusive. That's what we need. We always need to be inclusive. So the fact that, okay, California can have a page and we can have, I mean, the minute you mentioned it, I was like, oh, that's a great idea. And then part of me is like, why hasn't that already been done? I'm sure there's, I see things from the East Coast all the time about the whale museums and different things, and I love seeing the little videos. It's a way of staying connected, and this would just be another way of staying connected and seen. And you can never forget your history. Because when you mentioned it, the first thing I was like, oh yeah, we have our first crown still. And I have the article from, 1907 from our little local newspaper. Then it was called the Irrigator, the Selma Irrigator, when they actually bought this property in 1907, and there's things like that. And I am a history type person. So I would love to see the capes, the crowns, the pictures of the gatherings. As our cousin, since we're cousins, she's your cousin too. Maria Fernandez Simones. I got to participate in a CROA a few years ago, almost 5 years ago. It's about time for the next one in the Azores. But the picture she has from how long her family has done that, and of the people that gathered, and what they were doing and how they put it on, where you can see the continuity of what hasn't changed as far as baking the bread and whatnot, but then you see the younger faces and you go from black and white to color. All that kind of stuff would just be, I think, amazing in a digital world. And it just would open up the eyes, keep us all connected, and again, sharing the ideas, looking at a fundraiser that someone has back east, or something that was part of their history, like, hey, this is our annual whatever, and it's like, oh, they've done that for 100 years and it works for them. Maybe we could try it over here. It's the sharing. But I think it's great, and I like the digital world, obviously, the social media, websites, whatever, because they're all inclusive.
Well, and I believe because halls are not going to give up the first crown. Halls are not going to give up that one
No.
story, but they'll take a picture and digitalize that story, and then it's not only there, but it's also available to everyone else, not just in California and throughout. Elaine, what are your thoughts there? And you have the most tech savvy people up there, So
We do. And I was just thinking, I think what's been suggested here is, yes, it's a museum that everyone can visit no matter where they are in the world. Uh, there is in San Jose, they have the museum, but you have to be in San Jose to go to the museum if you don't live there. I would like to believe that the Luso-American Education Foundation could start that. It takes one person. We can all send a representative. We can have, and through these types of meetings, we also meet, we do it on Google Meet, but our directors were distant and not everyone's going to drive to the hall. So our meetings are 9 times out of 10 are of this style. It wouldn't take much. And if the Luso-American Education Foundation were interested, I'm sure Tisha, myself, people from other organizations would have someone, and it's a younger person for sure, that would be able to help coordinate. But there needs to be one organization that would be willing to start it.
Yeah, and I can tell you, as Tisha knows, we don't need anything else, but I think that the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute, our library, would be interested in doing it digitally, obviously.
Correct.
And they would, the Fresno State, and then it would be archived at the library, in other words, it would be part of the system that, that we wouldn't have to worry about always fundraising for this or fundraising for that. So I think it could be something that it could be worked. I think it just needs to have, of course, something like this will not exist without the folks being willing to digitalize what they have. In other words, to take a picture of an old crown, to take pictures, or or scan some of the old pictures, and everything else. And so it would be, and it takes work, and of course you have to have someone work at this, but I believe we kind of owe it to the next generations, and I never thought of it until this one person mentioned in our last panel, and I'm going to ask everybody in every single panel between now and Saturday night.
I think it's an excellent idea, and everyone would like, it's a continuity that lasts forever. Even when I am gone or individual people are gone, people will be able to go and visit a site and learn. And the realization that California has so many festas would probably shock a lot of people. They think it's just, oh, it's here in San Pablo or it's in Selma. No, the number of festas in California is like phenomenal.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, thank you both. I appreciate your time. Sorry for keeping you a little bit over time. I'm glad I don't have to pay you overtime, or else we'd be in a financial bind. But thank you all very, very much. Thank you, Elaine, and thank you, Tisha. Thank you for all your work. Thank you for your commitment to the Portuguese American experience. Best of luck, as always, with everything that you do. And on behalf of the Luso-American Education Foundation, on behalf of the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute of Fresno State, I'm really, really uh, proud of the work that all of our organizations are doing. And it's so wonderful to see that these smaller organizations have been so creative. My dad always used to say, the need will make you creative, and when you start something, it's like you said with your father the same way, hey, if they have a George Washington, we'll accept it. Doesn't make any difference where they come from. So that brings inclusivity and best for all of us. So once again, thank you so much on behalf of Luso-American Education Foundation and PBBI at Fresno State. Take care and have a wonderful night. Thank you very much.